The morning sun spilled over the cobblestone streets of Barcelona, painting the cafe windows in shades of gold. The soft hum of city life echoed. Footsteps, laughter, and the occasional honk of a passing car. Inside Café Luna, Lena Carter moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays of coffee and pastries with the kind of grace that only came from years of survival. She had no parents, no siblings, just her worn apron, her small rented room, and dreams she never said out loud to most people. Lena was just the cheerful waitress with honey brown eyes and a smile that could brighten a storm. But behind that smile lived stories of hunger, heartbreak, and sleepless nights, the kind that carved strength into a person's soul. That morning, fate decided to step into her cafe, a black luxury car parked across the street. Sleek, tinted, and too expensive for that neighborhood. From it stepped Evelyn Rossi, a woman whose presence turned heads before she even spoke. Elegant, confident, wrapped in pearls and perfume that smelled like old money and power, she entered the cafe quietly, scanning the room with the eyes of someone used to getting what she wanted. "Good morning, Senora," Lena greeted, smiling as she handed her the menu. Evelyn didn't look at the menu. She looked at Lena. Something in the girl's posture, the way she smiled despite the exhaustion in her eyes, stirred something inside the older woman, a strange blend of admiration and motherly warmth. "Do you own this place?" Evelyn asked, her tone calm but curious. Lena chuckled softly. "Oh, I wish. No, ma'am. I just work here." Evelyn studied her for a moment longer. "And yet, you serve like you own the world." Lena blinked, unsure if it was a compliment or a test. "I try my best," she said, that was all. But something about Lena lingered in Evelyn's mind long after she finished her coffee. Days passed. Evelyn returned again and again. Each time she chose the same seat by the window. Each time she spoke a little more, asking about Lena's life, her dreams, her struggles. At first, Lena was cautious. But Evelyn's warmth broke through her guard. Soon they talked like old friends. Evelyn learned Lena had lost her parents in a car accident years ago. She'd been working since she was 16, saving every coin for a better life that never seemed to come. One afternoon, Evelyn asked softly, "Lena, have you ever thought about getting married?" Lena laughed nervously. "Me? No, Senora. Who would marry a poor waitress?" Evelyn's lips curved into a knowing smile. "Sometimes life gives us what we never dared to ask for." She said nothing more. But that night she returned to her mansion, to her son, Damien Rossi. Damien was power-wrapped in silence, tall, sharp, and distant. By day, he ran his empire with precision. By night, he was the hidden hand behind one of Spain's most feared underground networks. No one outside his circle knew what he truly was. Evelyn, though, knew everything, and she knew her son was losing himself to darkness. Cold, ruthless, unreachable, she wanted to save him. Even if it meant forcing light into his world, that light had a name now. Lena Carter. Weeks later, Evelyn returned to Café Luna, this time with an offer Lena never expected. "My son is looking for someone to help him with his household management," Evelyn lied gently. "He's difficult but kind. You would be well paid." Lena hesitated. "Your son. I don't know if I—" "Please," Evelyn interrupted, touching her hand. "I feel something special about you, dear. You remind me of someone I once loved." After a long pause, Lena nodded. "All right, I'll try." That single yes would change her life forever. When she arrived at the Rossi estate, her heart almost stopped. The mansion was breathtaking. Marble floors, chandeliers, and guards who pretended to be staff. The air felt thick with unspoken rules, and there he was, Damien Rossi, standing at the grand staircase, wearing a black suit and an expression that could freeze time. Their eyes met. His were piercing, cold, unreadable. Hers were soft, uncertain. Evelyn smiled proudly. "Damien, this is Lena, the girl I told you about." He looked at Lena for a long, silent moment. Then, with a voice low and edged with command, he said, "People who work for me don't break rules. Understand that, Miss Carter." Lena swallowed, nodding. "Yes, sir." He walked away without another word. Evelyn exhaled softly. She saw it, the spark. It was faint, buried under walls of pride and pain, but it was there. That night, Lena stood by her small room's window, looking out at the sea of city lights from the Rossi mansion. She didn't know why her heart raced whenever she thought of that man. And she didn't know that his mother had already made up her mind, that this girl would be the one to bring her son back from the darkness. 2 months had passed since Lena began working for the Rossis. She had learned every corner of that mansion. From the marble halls that echoed with secrets to the quiet gardens where Evelyn liked to sip her evening tea every morning, she saw Damien leaving for business meetings. Always in his black suit, always guarded by men who looked like shadows. He never smiled, never lingered. And yet sometimes she caught him watching her, silently through reflections or across corridors. It was a glance that felt like lightning, dangerous, brief, impossible to read. Evelyn noticed everything. She saw how Damien's eyes softened when Lena brought him coffee, how he paused, just for a second, when she laughed with the maids. It wasn't love yet, it was curiosity. But for Evelyn that was enough. One evening, Evelyn invited Lena into her private sitting room. Candles glowed against gold-framed paintings. The scent of jasmine filled the air. "Lena," Evelyn began gently, "you've brought a certain peace to this house. My son, he's not an easy man. But since you came, I see a change in him." Lena smiled shyly. "I'm glad if I've helped, Senora. He just needs a little kindness." Evelyn's eyes glimmered. "Yes, and that is exactly what he's missing." There was a pause, long, careful, deliberate. "Lena, have you ever thought of starting a family?" Lena blinked. "A family?" The question struck her like thunder. "No, ma'am. I don't even have anyone." Evelyn leaned closer, her tone soft but filled with quiet authority. "What if you could have one? Family. Home. A man who would protect you for life." Lena laughed nervously. "That sounds like a dream, but—" "I'm not speaking of a dream," Evelyn interrupted. "I'm speaking of my son." The room fell silent. For a moment, the words didn't make sense. Then Lena's breath caught. "Your son. Damien." Evelyn nodded. "He needs someone like you. Someone pure. Someone who isn't after his wealth or power. You could save him, Lena." Lena stood slowly, her pulse quickening. "Senora Rossi, with all respect, I can't marry a man I barely know." Evelyn's voice softened even more. "He needs you, dear. And you need someone who will keep you safe. You've lived a life of struggle long enough. Let me give you a home. A future." Lena shook her head, trembling. "You're kind, but he doesn't even like me. He barely speaks to me." Evelyn smiled faintly. "He doesn't speak to anyone. But he listens, Lena. Especially to you." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Her heart was torn between fear and confusion. She had no one, no family. Yet the thought of marrying Damien felt impossible. The next morning, Damien returned home earlier than usual. Evelyn met him in the study. "Damien," she said firmly, "I've made a decision." He looked up from his glass of bourbon. "About what?" "About your future. You're marrying Lena." The glass froze in his hand. "What did you just say?" Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. "She's good for you. She's pure, selfless. She'll bring balance to your life." Damien's voice dropped, cold and dangerous. "Mother, I'm not marrying anyone. Especially not a waitress." Evelyn's tone hardened. "You will. Or you'll lose this empire. Everything your father built." There was the one thing that could make the Mafia boss obey. His father's name was sacred. Damien slammed the glass down, the sound cracking through the silence. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," Evelyn said calmly. "You are. And it's time you stopped before it kills you." For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Damien turned away, jaw tight, eyes like storm clouds. "Fine," he said coldly. "If it makes you happy, I'll marry her. But don't expect me to love her." When Lena was called to the study the next day, she had no idea what awaited her. Damien stood by the window, his face unreadable. Evelyn sat behind her desk, her hands clasped like a queen who had already decided fate. "Lena," Evelyn said gently. My son has agreed. You'll be married by the end of the week. Lena's voice broke. Married? I can't. Please, Senora, this is too much. Damien turned, his tone sharp. You think I want this either? You'll have everything you need. A home, protection, a name. Don't mistake this for love. Tears welled in Lena's eyes. Then why force it? Evelyn rose, placing her hand over Lena's. Because sometimes the people meant to save us don't choose the path. Fate chooses it for them. Lena felt her knees weaken. She wanted to scream, to run, but something in Evelyn's touch held her there, a strange trust. A hope that maybe this woman truly wanted the best for her. I need time, Lena whispered. You have until morning, Evelyn said softly. Then we start preparing. That night, Lena walked alone in the mansion's garden. The wind was cold, brushing against her tears, and in the distance, she saw Damien standing by the fountain, smoking in silence. She hesitated, then spoke. Why are you agreeing to this if you don't want to? He didn't turn around. Because I don't say no to my mother. And me? She asked quietly. What about my choice? He looked at her then, those steel-gray eyes softening for the first time. You'll be safe with me, Lena. You may hate me for a while, but no one will ever hurt you again. The words were strange, half comfort, half warning, and before she could reply, he walked away, leaving smoke and silence behind him. Days later, the mansion was alive with preparations, white roses, crystal chandeliers, cameras banned, guests limited, a wedding that looked like royalty, yet felt like a funeral to Lena. When she walked down the aisle, she saw Damien waiting. Tall, emotionless, hands in pockets. He didn't smile. He didn't even pretend to, but when the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," he looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the man behind the mask, a flash of sorrow. A flicker of something human. He kissed her forehead instead of her lips, whispered something no one else heard. Welcome to the storm, Mrs. Rossi. The wedding was quiet, no music loud enough to hide the tension, no laughter strong enough to mask the silence between bride and groom. Lena stood beside Damien, her hands trembling as the priest's words echoed across the Rossi chapel. Her heart pounded against her chest, not out of love, but fear of the unknown. Evelyn, sitting in the front row, watched with misty eyes. To her, this was hope. Lena, it was a chain wrapped in silk. When the ceremony ended, Damien offered his arm out of duty, not affection. They walked out together. Two souls tied by a promise neither had wanted outside. Photographers snapped pictures for the newspapers that would later headline, "The Mysterious Marriage of Damien Rossi." But no one knew the truth, and no one knew the storm that waited behind those mansion doors. That night, the newlyweds arrived at the Rossi estate. The staff greeted them with forced smiles, bowing respectfully. Lena could feel the weight of their stares, whispers following her every step. Her wedding gown shimmered under the chandeliers, but her heart felt heavy, like it was wrapped in stone. Damien walked ahead, his silence cutting sharper than any insult. When they reached the master suite, he opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "This is your room," he said flatly. Lena blinked, confused. "My room?" He nodded. "You'll stay here. I'll be in the other wing." Her voice trembled. "But we're married." He looked at her, cold, unreadable. "On paper. That's all that matters." The words shattered something inside her. Tears welled up, but she forced them down, refusing to let him see her break. He turned to leave but paused at the door. "One more thing," he said quietly, his tone low and dangerous. "Whatever my mother says, you stay out of my business. You don't ask questions, you don't follow me. This house runs on silence." Then he left, the door closing behind him with a soft, final click. Lena sank to the floor, clutching her gown, and whispered to herself, "What have I done?" Days passed. The mansion became a maze of silence. Damien left early, returned late. Lena never knew where he went, only that his clothes sometimes smelled faintly of gunpowder and smoke. Evelyn tried to ease the tension, inviting Lena for tea, encouraging her to give him time. But time didn't soften Damien. It hardened him. Still, Lena did what she knew best. She brought warmth where there was none, She cooked, arranged flowers, talked to the maids, laughed with the guards. Slowly, her light started to spread through the dark corners of the Rossi home. And though Damien never admitted it, he noticed the way her laughter reached his office from the courtyard. The way she left tea on his desk every morning, untouched yet always waiting. And the way his mother smiled again for the first time. In years, he hated that he noticed, because every time he looked at Lena, he saw something he couldn't control. Peace, and peace to a man like him was dangerous. One evening, Lena waited in the dining hall, dressed simply but beautifully. It was the first time she dared to prepare dinner for them both. When Damien walked in, he stopped. The table was lit with candles. The food smelled like home, not luxury, but comfort. "What's this?" he asked, suspicion edging his voice. "Dinner," she said. "Softly. For us." He frowned. "We don't have to pretend, Lena." "I'm not pretending," she said. "I just thought maybe we could talk." He stared at her, those gray eyes unreadable, stormy. Then, without a word, they ate in silence at first, but slowly, the wall between them cracked, just a little. He asked about her parents, she asked about his childhood. He told her nothing real, but for the first time he listened. When dinner ended, he stood and said quietly, "You shouldn't try so hard to fix what can't be fixed." Lena smiled sadly. "Maybe it's not about fixing you. Maybe it's about reminding you that you're human." He froze. No one had ever spoken to him like that. That night, Damien couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in his mind, over and over. "Maybe it's about reminding you that you're human." He poured himself a drink, staring out the window at the city lights below. He'd faced gunfire, betrayal, and blood. But this woman terrified him in a way bullets never could, because she made him feel. Meanwhile, in her room, Lena wrote in her journal, her secret escape. "I don't understand him. He's cruel, distant. Yet sometimes I see a shadow of kindness in his eyes. I don't know why, but I can't hate him. Maybe because I see pain in him. The kind I know too well." She closed the book, unaware that Damien stood outside her door, listening. His jaw tight, his heart silent but unsteady. The next morning, Evelyn found her son in the garden. "See," she said softly. "She's already changing you." He turned sharply. "Don't push me, Mother." Evelyn smiled. "I don't need to. She will." Damien walked away, but his mother's words lingered like smoke because deep down, he knew she was right. Something was changing, and he didn't know whether to fight it or surrender. That night, Lena placed tea outside his study again, but this time when she came to collect the cup later, it was empty. She smiled to herself. It was a small thing, but to her it meant everything. The city never truly slept. Tea night. Barcelona glowed beneath a blanket of secrets. Sirens, whispers, and the hum of lives built on lies. Inside the Rossi mansion, another storm was brewing. Weeks had passed since the wedding. Outsiders, Damien and Lena looked like the perfect couple. But behind the mansion gates, their marriage was a battlefield of silence and tension. Damien kept his distance. Lena kept her kindness. Every morning, she greeted him with a soft, "Good morning." Every night, he returned without a word. His eyes heavy from meetings that ended in places no good man should go. Yet something was shifting, slowly, invisibly, like ice beginning to crack beneath the first touch of spring. One evening, Lena heard raised voices coming from Damien's study. She paused by the door. "You're losing control, Damien," a man barked. "Your mother's making you soft." That girl. The sound of a fist slamming against the desk cut him off. "Watch your mouth." Damien growled. Silence. Then the door opened, and the man stormed out. Brushing past Lena without a glance, Damien stood in the doorway, eyes burning with anger when he saw Lena. His expression changed. Confusion flickered, then shame. She spoke gently. "You don't have to shout to be heard." He turned away. "You don't understand my world." "Then help me understand," she said quietly. He didn't answer. But that night, for the first time, he didn't leave the mansion. The next morning, Lena was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. Damien walked in. No suit, no guard, just him in a black t-shirt, tired but human. "Coffee?" she asked, surprised. He nodded. "Black." She smiled. "Figures." He watched her move around the kitchen, calm, effortless, humming to herself. It reminded him of a life he'd never known, one without fear or blood, and for the first time in years he laughed. Just once, soft and startled. Lena turned. "Did you just laugh, Mr. Rossi?" He looked away. "Don't get used to it." But she did, and every day afterward, she found a way to make him laugh again. While love quietly bloomed inside, danger circled outside. A rival family, the Delgados, had begun to notice Damien's change in routine. His meetings grew shorter. His nights quieter. Rumors spread like wildfire. The boss had a weakness. One night, Damien met his right-hand man in the basement office. "They're watching us," the man warned. "If they think she's important." "She isn't," Damien snapped. The man raised a brow. "Then why post guards at her door?" Damien didn't reply. He just poured himself another drink, the ice clinking louder than his heartbeat. Later that week, Lena found him on the balcony, staring at the sea, rain soaking through his shirt. "You'll catch a cold," she said, stepping beside him with an umbrella. He didn't move. "You shouldn't be out here." "Neither should you." He glanced at her, then really looked at her. The raindrops on her lashes, the calm in her eyes, it disarmed him. "Why do you stay?" he asked suddenly. "You could leave." "You should." She smiled faintly. "Because maybe I'm supposed to be here. Maybe you need someone to remind you that you're still human." He turned away, jaw tightening. "Humanity gets people killed." "Maybe," she whispered. "But it also saves them." He didn't answer, but that night he dreamed of her. Not as a burden, but as the one thing worth protecting. 3 nights later, the mansion alarm shattered. The calm windows broke. Footsteps. Lena woke to chaos. Guards running, doors slamming. Damien burst into her room, gun in hand. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "What's happening?" she cried. "Delgados. They found us." He pulled her close, shielding her as they moved through the dark corridors. The sound of gunfire echoed outside. Not shown, only heard, distant but terrifying. When they reached the panic room, Lena's hands shook. Damien turned to her. His face hard but eyes full of fear, for her, not himself. "If anything happens, don't open that door." She grabbed his arm. "Don't go." He hesitated, the first time she'd ever seen him afraid. Then, softer than a prayer, he said, "You're my reason to come back." And he disappeared into the chaos. Hours later, silence returned, smoke lingered, but the threat was gone. Damien came back. Bruised, exhausted, alive. Lena ran to him before she could think, her arms wrapping around him. For a moment, the world stopped. He didn't push her away. He just breathed her in, whispering, "You're safe. That's all that matters." It was the first time he'd held someone not out of possession but protection. The city never slept that night. Somewhere beyond the glittering skyline, a storm was building. Not one made of thunder, but of men, metal, and vengeance. Weeks had passed since Damien finally let his guard down, since he began to love Lena not as the wife forced upon him, but as the woman who somehow soothed his soul. She had become laughter in his empty mansion, light in his shadowed heart. And that was exactly what made her a target. It began quietly. A car that followed her from the market, a stranger's reflection in the cafe window. She told Damien once, with a nervous laugh, "Maybe I'm just imagining things." He had smiled, kissed her forehead, and promised, "No one will ever touch you." He didn't know that promise would soon be tested. One afternoon, Lena left to deliver food to an orphanage. Something she did in secret, still the kind-hearted waitress who never forgot hunger. But on the empty road back, 2 black SUVs cornered her small car. By the time Damien got the call, her phone was already smashed. Evelyn, his mother, stood frozen as Damien threw on his jacket. "Who took her?" she whispered. "The same people I once called allies," he said coldly, loading his gun. "They think they can use her to break me." "Damien, listen to me," his mother begged. "She's your life now. Don't lose yourself again." But the devil in Damien had already awakened. Not for greed, not for pride. This time, for love. Midnight, the Rossi mansion became a war room. Maps spread across the table. Orders flew like sparks. Men who once feared him now saw something different in his eyes. Desperation. Outside, the city trembled. Inside an abandoned warehouse, Lena sat bound, bruised but unbroken. When one of her captors sneered, "Your husband's empire will fall tonight," she looked up and whispered, "You don't know him. He'll come. And he did. Headlights sliced through the dark. Engines roared. Gunfire erupted. A storm of chaos and redemption. Damien fought like a man possessed. Every punch and every move a prayer to see her alive again. Through smoke and shattered glass, their eyes met. She was crying, whispering his name. He reached her, bleeding, broken but unstoppable. "Lena," he gasped, untying her hands. "You came for me." "Always," he breathed, pulling her close. By dawn, sirens wailed in the distance. The warehouse burned behind them. Damien's men carried him out. Barely conscious, his blood staining Lena's hands, she refused to let go. "Don't you dare leave me," she cried, pressing his wound. "You promised." He smiled weakly, his voice fading. "I told you. No one will ever touch you." Evelyn met them at the mansion gates, tears flooding her eyes. "My son," she whispered, "you finally found something worth living for." Weeks later, Damien awoke in a hospital bed. Sunlight streamed through the blinds. Lena sat beside him, her hand in his, her eyes red but shining. "You're still here," he murmured. "Where else would I be?" She smiled faintly. "Even devils need someone to pray for them." He laughed, a small broken sound that carried peace. "You make me wish I'd been good all along." Outside the window, the city looked softer somehow, as if even its shadows had finally forgiven him. The days that followed were slow and quiet, the kind of quiet Damien Rossi had never known. Gone were the echoes of gunfire, the whispered codes, and the scent of danger that once filled his lungs. Now, all he could smell was the faint aroma of coffee, Lena's favorite. Drifting through their sunlit kitchen, he sat there, bandaged and weary, watching her hum softly as she watered the flowers by the window. She was smiling, and somehow that smile was louder than any war he'd ever fought. Every scar on his body told a story. Every silence between them told another. Sometimes at night, he'd wake up gasping, haunted by dreams of that warehouse, the blood, the screams, and Lena would be there, pressing her forehead against his, whispering, "You're safe. We're home." He'd nod, hold her tighter, and murmur, "I don't deserve you." She'd smile through sleepy eyes. "No one deserves love. We just get lucky when it finds us." Evelyn watched them from afar, her heart full. She had once forced this marriage, thinking she was saving her son's soul, but never imagined Lena would actually heal it. Every morning she'd see Damien helping in the garden. His hands once used for destruction, now planting flowers beside the woman who tamed his fire. "Look at you," Evelyn whispered one morning, tears glistening. Her son smiled, really smiled. "You gave me an angel, Mom." Months later, Damien officially walked away from the underground world. It wasn't easy. Devils don't just vanish, but his reputation was enough to buy silence, and his love for Lena was enough to make him never look back. They built a small restaurant in Madrid. Cielo Café, meaning Heaven Café. It was Lena's dream, born from the life she left behind. And Damien? He was there every morning before sunrise, setting chairs, sweeping floors, making coffee, quietly grateful for the woman who gave him a reason to start over. Their first customer was Evelyn, of course, smiling proudly as she sipped her espresso. She looked at her son and said, "Redemption suits you." He smiled back, eyes soft. "It was never mine alone. She brought it." But life, as always, doesn't promise forever without pain. Damien still carried the weight of his past. Men he'd hurt, friends he'd lost, choices he could never undo. Sometimes he'd stand on the balcony at dusk, staring at the horizon, lost in thoughts too heavy to speak. Lena would quietly join him, slipping her hand into his. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked once. He looked at her, the only light that had ever reached him. "No," he whispered, "because every wrong path led me to you." And she smiled, that soft, trembling smile that healed him every time. Then I guess fate knew what it was doing. Years later, the legend of Damien Rossi faded into whispers. The city remembered him as a myth, a man who vanished after one final war. But those who ever walked into Cielo Café could still feel something in the air. A warmth, a peace, a love that had survived the ashes. Behind the counter stood Lena, still humming her soft Spanish lullabies, her eyes shining whenever a customer mentioned her husband. And sometimes, at closing time, when the lights dimmed, Damien would step out from the kitchen, wrap his arms around her, and they'd dance, slow, quiet, unhurried, like two souls who had finally made it home. And that, is how the devil found his heaven, a love that began with pain, turned into peace, a woman who had nothing gave a man with everything. A reason to live. Tell me in the comments, would you have trusted a love born out of chaos? If you felt their pain, their passion, and their redemption, drop a love emoji in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. This is Mafia. Hearts, where love always finds its way through the fire. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the next story, because sometimes, even devils deserve an ending.